Thank you for that wonderful question. And I also want to appreciate the foundation that Mr. Yerinde has set, giving us the history behind the developments that we're seeing today. As you've rightly mentioned, the increasing pace of globalization and cross-border transaction um, have significant financial reporting implication. And I will just, let me start with the complexity of transaction. So take, for instance, and I'm going to use practical example. Take, for instance, 10 years ago, or yeah, 10 years ago, banks in Nigeria, when you look at the investment portfolio, 10, 15 years ago, will you see placement, loans, and maybe treasury bills and bonds. But today, when you look at the investment portfolio of banks within Nigeria, you're going to have significant cross-border exposure. It's just a pointer. We're going to begin the impact. One key import of cross-border transaction is the number of transactions, complexity of transactions, and diversity of transactions. With globalization, you see more complex transactions. A couple of years ago, when we hear things like derivatives, swaps, cross-currency swaps, interest rate swaps, they sound very distant. But I can tell you today, Nigerian banks are playing in those fields. So with cross-border transaction, you will see a lot of complex transactions that before now hitherto looked very distant and looked very something that is not common, but now it is very common. Also, the one key impact also with this complexity and diversity, you now have a need for consistency and comparability. So one key import of globalization and cross-border transaction is the need for businesses who have cross-border exposure or who are involved in cross-border transaction to begin to think about consistency when you have shareholders or even stakeholders, debt holders, your debt holders who are really involved or interested or party to the business asking for more reporting requirements. That's one key import. So you have businesses in Nigeria who maybe before now they raise their CPs or they raise their bonds, and the only investors are from the Nigerian market today. With increasing cross-border investment, you have FPIs and even FDIs investing in these instruments, and then at certain level they are having significant engagement and requiring unique type of transaction reporting that is amenable to their own jurisdiction. With cross-border transaction, and Mr. Yoride mentioned this, there is increasing need for harmonization. When you look at the volume of trade, as you mentioned, more than 3/3, actually around 80% of trade today are cross-border trade. And what that means is that when you have this cross-border trade, you have the need for harmonization of standards and reporting. And it then means that businesses need to begin to make investments around the skill set, the experience, the tools required for harmonized reporting. In terms of regulatory challenges, businesses that before now were really local, as a result of cross-border transactions, they are then exposed to, take for instance, in my early days, we had companies in Nigeria, registered in Nigeria, but they are involved in what is called SOX reporting, Sarbanes-Oxley reporting for the US market. So cross-border transaction and cross-border investment have really broadened the landscape of regulatory compliance and regulatory reporting. And again, broadened also the compliance risk of these entities. So finally, let me end here. Cross-border transactions and globalization has also increased the need for technology. And it goes without saying that without technology, really it's difficult to play in the global market. So cross-border transaction has really increased the need for investment in technology, investment in tools, investment in even when we hear things like robo-advisory, investments in AI. These are really the import of cross-border transaction. Let me stop here. Thank you, Chidozie.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel.